Recording started.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Jaggy here Bylaws Creation Committee. Today, now that we've had about 2 weeks of debate here in Discord regarding some proposals for general bylaw structures, today's when we're going to actually propose and then vote on some of our big ideas about how this new Jaggy here should get structured. So things like, we're not trying to get into specifics yet, but the general gist of stuff like what are the executive bodies or what are the leadership bodies that represent the game? And how could this game fund itself? And things like that. We were hoping that we've created a new Discord channel, the committee motion drafts one. And we were hoping to see some formal proposals based on the discussion over the past few weeks, but we haven't seen any yet. So that's going to be our first order of business today. Now that we've had 2 weeks to discuss stuff, we've done our brainstorming, we've talked about things. What are some formal proposals that people actually want to see happen? And just a reminder, if you have something to say or something to put forward, please write hand in the committee chat or in the meeting chat so that you can be recognized. First, let's take a think about leadership bodies. I feel like everything else is going to depend on that. Does anyone have formal proposals for how the leadership bodies of this organization should be structured?
There's a hand in the committee motion drafts room.
Okay. Stone, go ahead.
Yeah, so I motion for a 3-body committee policy with a executive board, a council of chapters, and a group and members. Specifically, a structure where members elect their council representative in some way, and then chapter council representatives elect executive board. I'm sorry, I was on the wrong channel when I said hand.
That is all good. Am I successfully presenting my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we have our first proposal for how the leadership of a national Dagger Hero organization should be structured. That proposal includes or consists of an executive board containing or elected by the members who elect a chapter council, and then the chapter council who then elects an executive board. The responsibilities of those various bodies are still up in the air, and those are not to be determined yet. Does anyone have alternative proposals for how this should be structured? If we don't have any alternative proposals, we will just all vote yay or nay on this, but Roran, go ahead.
I would like to propose a system where we have the executive board and the chapter council, but membership is not recorded at the national level and is instead handled by the chapters.
Okay, so effectively a similar structure, but there's no national membership.
Yeah, there's no national individual membership.
Okay. So, question. Is that something that's better determined here in the leadership body section or something better determined later on when we talk about the responsibilities of the various bodies?
I think that actually, that could be its own separate thing. We could, decide on having the chapter council and the executive board and worry about membership as its own thing. That makes sense to me.
Okay, excellent. That is an important note, though. So
Hi, this is Ericus. I don't see how I'm supposed to raise my hand.
you're just type the word hand or something to that effect in the committee meeting chat. So I'm just going to make a note for that to address later. I'm assuming that there's going to be another proposal coming forward. Okay, gonna give it another 20 seconds or so.
Sai, you can't hear anyone else speak? No. Okay, that deals with that technical difficulty.
The chapters should select their representatives per vote/meeting. I'm not sure if I understand. Ericos, could you clarify?
Perhaps you could restate the first proposal you made.
So the first proposal here is the details obviously are still to be determined. That would be determined at a later date. But in general, that the leadership structure of Dagger here would consist of members, a chapter council elected individually by members within those chapters, and then an executive board whose composition are all elected by the chapter council.
Oh, okay, that wasn't clear. Thanks. Got it.
Sorry. Gorbag, go ahead.
Largely just for a second proposal, a three-body structure with members voting on both the chapter council at a local level and the executive board at a national level.
Okay. So the main difference is who's electing the executive board.
Correct.
Sounds good. Opening the floor to any further proposals. Gonna give it about 30 to 40 seconds. Since the members technically have a role, they are technically a body within Dagger here. So members here represent individual people. Say about 10, 15 more seconds.
This is Luda. I just wanted
Yes.
that we've had a couple of reps come in newly to the meeting, so maybe a quick
Okay.
recap.
Recap. So today our goal is to propose and then vote on some general decisions regarding the overarching structure of a new national Dagger here. This is not where we determine specific details. For example, we're not going to be determining necessarily exactly what the specific duties of any given executive board member might be today. But today's our goal is to have an idea of like, will we have an executive board in National Dagger here? Will that board be elected by chapters or by individuals? What sorts of funding options should we be thinking through? Stuff like that. Right now we're talking about leadership bodies, and the two proposals put forward so far are of a three-body organization consisting of members, a chapter council elected by individual members within each chapter, and then an executive board elected by chapter representatives. Or, alternatively, a similar structure except where the executive board is elected by popular vote across all of Dagger here. So, effectively, the difference here is popular vote for the executive board versus representative elections. That is, Ericos, that is something to be determined at a later date. Right now, we're talking about general structure. The specifics of how we oversee stuff is something to work out later. We will be voting on that as long as we don't have any other proposals put forward, correct? Roran, go ahead.
I have a question about the second proposal.
Yes.
In that sort of structure where individuals elect both the chapter council and the executive board, what is then the function of the chapter council if not to elect the executive board?
So the specific responsibilities of the executive board and the chapter council would obviously be determined later, but for example, the executive
Okay.
board could be doing other stuff, whereas the chapter council is responsible for proposing and then voting on amendments to the manual of arms and stuff like that.
Okay, so like game rule changes. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other proposals, so we're going to go ahead and vote on either here, proposal 1 or proposal 2. Luda or Stone, one of them is going to be drafting the motion in the committee motions and votes chat, and that's where people will vote. I want to remind you, please do not vote until the text declaring what the vote is on is in the chat.
One point.
Yes.
I noticed in the committee meeting chat earlier that Moog asked a question.
Oh, did I miss something?
Yeah. Is it members as individual members or should that be chapters? That seems like a good
Yeah,
distinction.
that was, I answered that that was the member here means an individual human being, a person.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the double check. We do have too many chat rooms. Currently, we're about to vote on either of these two options for a formal, leadership structure. The first option is members elect a chapter council and the chapter council elects an executive board. The second option is the members elect both the chapter council and executive board. So the difference being popular vote for executive board in proposal 2 versus representative vote for executive board in proposal 1. So we're currently getting the text for that vote into the committee motions chat. And then once that text is down, I will cue you all to begin voting, all of the chapter representatives that are present. Who's working on, can someone confirm that we're getting the text for the motion into
I'm
the chat,
working on it.
please? Okay, thank you, sorry.
Hi, this is Luda. So I have entered the two
Shouldn't-
options into the motions. And I wanted to note that right now we have 8. Oh, sorry, looks like we have another one. 9 representatives.
Point of order, shouldn't that be in the committee motions and votes?
I am not seeing it in the correct chat for what it's worth.
It's in
Thanks for
motion
catching me.
drafts.
Thanks, I'll put it in the right channel. Sorry about that.
Thank you all for your patience as we work through technology. Okay. So all of our chapter representatives, please now vote on our 2 leadership body proposals in the committee motions and votes chat. If any chapter representative is present but cannot vote, please let us know so that we can make sure you have voting privileges. Okay, voting will close in the next 30-40 seconds. I think we have just about everyone, unless I'm miscounting. Okay, I believe that is everyone. Currently, the vote is unanimously for proposal 1.
Aha, one moment.
Yes.
I
Thank you.
believe that Sai is representing.
Oh, true. Sai, you just got here, right? Do you need a refresher on what the vote is on? He may be experiencing technical difficulties. If that is the case, then we can get him caught up when those get resolved. For now, though, we're going to move on. He votes number 1. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Well, as that gets worked out, we're going to move on to the next section, which is on board composition. Does anyone have proposals for how our executive board should be structured? I know that was something that we talked about extensively 2 meetings ago. And I didn't see a debate on executive board composition recently, but some of the possible options that were discussed a few weeks ago included a structure similar to what we have now, a 9-member structure with president, VP, treasurer, secretary, arbiter, shadow, chapter, admin, website admin, rules admin, social media, merchants guild, events master. A different proposal had an executive director, director of operations, public relations, finance, records, and arbiter. And a number of people all agreed with having the role titles represent their responsibilities rather than things like president, vice president, stuff like that. Roran, go ahead.
I think it was Brogar a couple meetings ago had a really good one. I can't find it now. But I liked that. Brogar, are you here? Is Brogar here?
Was it this one?
I don't know. I can't see your screen. Screen share doesn't work on my computer.
Oh, sorry. Executive director, director of operations, director of public relations,
Yes, that is the one.
Records, and Arbiter. Okay, I can
Yes.
copy that. Gorbag, go ahead.
I think it would be appropriate for this, but that same structure with the addition of ad hoc committees.
Ad hoc committees meaning committees formed by the chapter council representatives. I'm not sure what that means.
So the various directors and/or chapter council able to form ad hoc committees for specific purposes.
Okay. Okay, so I think that's going to be a separate yay or nay vote, but that's a good suggestion.
I wasn't sure if it'd be that or
Yeah.
responsibilities because it kind of walks that line.
Still though, that will be something that we can all vote yay or nay on once we get the board composition sorted out. Thank you for that. I like it. Okay. We have one proposal here for the structure of executive board. That structure would be executive director, and then directors for operations, PR, finance, records, and arbiter. Are there any alternative proposals that anyone would like to suggest? I'm going to open up the floor for the next minute or so, extending that time if other proposals get put forward. And if anyone else is unable to see my screen, I recognize that I'm using that a lot and needs some context for what's going on. Please let me know so that I can update.
This is Stone. May I speak?
Please go ahead.
Putting out there, maybe as a second vote, a shadow who is intended to be the backup,
Okay. So,
and to make it a not even number of direct board members for votes.
shadow is something that I've seen proposed before. The way that I think I'm going to do this is we're going to have the formal board compositions vote, and then after that, we're going to have yay nay votes on should we include a shadow in the formal board, whatever that might take. Because I'm not sure if we should just have the role of shadow being there be a whole separate proposal, and then we can vote on whether the board can form ad hoc and chapter council can form ad hoc committees, unless anyone has opposing suggestions for how this should be structured. Okay, it's been a minute and 30 seconds. I haven't seen any alternative proposals. So this is going to be a yay nay vote on proposal 1 for our executive board composition. Please refrain from voting until the text for the vote is in the chat. Okay, text for our motion is in the chat. Please, chapter representatives, now vote yay or nay on this proposed executive board composition.
This is Luda, one note.
Yes, please go ahead.
I noticed that Jareth from Galadorn popped out and back in. Just wanted to make sure that he knew that we are voting in the committee motions and votes. So, Jareth, if you have a vote, please go ahead.
You're going to leave the floor open for 40 more seconds.
Thank you. I'm good.
You're all set. Okay, I think then that should be just about everyone. That looks like a unanimous vote in favor of this proposed board composition. Next, to vote on whether we should include a position of shadow in our executive board. A reminder for those of you that may be unfamiliar, shadow is a position from the RAG board of directors, where it's effectively an understudy that also has some can play supporting roles and or step in for any board member that is not president or arbiter, I think. Is that correct? If those people are unable to fulfill their responsibilities. So thank you for your patience as we get the text for our next vote of whether to include or not include shadow on our executive board.
There's a hand.
Sorry, missed that. Hand, go ahead, Gorbag.
One question, would the shadow be able to vote if the directors have a vote or ever need a vote, or would they just be fulfilling duties?
That would be something to be decided later. Or we could have a vote between shadow with vote, shadow without vote versus no shadow at all. Now. Jeffrey, go ahead.
I'd like to make a different proposal. The shadow does all the same things you mentioned, except can fill in for arbiter and or president if needed, since it sounds like there's not currently a way to replace those people if they can't fulfill their duties.
Okay. Proposal heard. Okay, so now let me think how we can, there's a sort of flowchart of options here, and I'm thinking how we can structurally. So in terms of who the shadow can fill in for and how the shadow can vote, that is something that a subcommittee of this group can decide on as we're figuring out the finer details of the Dagger Here bylaws between now and August. So I don't think it would be appropriate to vote on the specific details of what the shadow cannot do today, but we're just going to focus on whether the shadow should or should not be included in the executive board for right now. And then later, when those finer details get proposed and decided on within a subcommittee, we'll have an opportunity to approve or disapprove of those proposals later. Is anyone unsatisfied with that? Gorbag, was that just now, or did you already?
No, that was just now.
Okay, please go ahead.
To possibly split the difference, would it be possible to table the vote for the shadow until some of that conversation could be had because
Certainly.
my vote would largely depend on what their actual roles and functions and responsibilities would be.
Okay. Okay, so we've had one proposal to table the vote on the role of Shadow. Does anyone object to tabling the role of Shadow? Seconded. We're going to table Shadow for now.
Do we need
Okay.
a vote on tabling Shadow? I don't know how closely we're following Robert's rules.
Okay. Well, that would be up to the committee. I see typing, so I'm waiting to see what happens. Yeah. So again, does anyone object to tabling the vote for Shadow? And then lacking any objections, we will table it for next time. Thank you, Cyrile. Yeah, okay. I'm not seeing any objections. So we're going to be tabling Shadow for now. So I'm just going to make a list of stuff to address later. Next decision. Does anyone have thoughts for or against the ability of the leadership bodies, the executive board and chapter council, to form ad hoc committees? That would be the next thing for us to vote on. Does anyone have thoughts or suggestions or amendments to that before we put it to vote? Luda, referring to the ability to form ad hoc committees. Roran, go ahead.
I have thoughts. My thoughts are that it would be a bit strange for the executive board to form committees within itself because it's so small.
Okay.
But that it would make a lot of sense for the chapter council to form committees if they had a reason to do so. It doesn't seem like we should limit them from being able to do stuff. So,
Okay. Noted. Stone, go ahead.
I was going to say something similar that
Okay.
there is not much point of the board being able to formate a committee.
Fair. Noted. Gorbag, go ahead.
So the general idea that I've seen of the executive board being able to form committees is in order to form committees to handle their specific duties so that the director is not truly in charge of everything, but that they are, creating these committees to handle specific things.
Okay. Okay, so that then is different. So my understanding was the ability of for the chapter council to representatives to form committees to propose things or make decisions.
Yes, it's that was
whereas
more in reference to
alternatively-
why a director would need to form a
Okay.
committee, because that seemed to be a question that people were
So
asking.
So is that an appropriate description for what you're talking about, Gorbag?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay. Thank you, Ericus. Noted. Roran, go ahead.
So it feels like to me we're talking about two different things when we say
Yes,
committees. I
that's
feel like we could separate
what I'm
that
trying
into
to
two
clarify.
separate sorts of things. So a committee could be, members within that body forming sort of a subcommittee of that body to discuss an issue or to come up with a proposal or something of that nature. And in terms of individual members of the executive board, bringing people on to help them with their responsibilities, I feel like we could call that something else. I feel like it's a
Yes.
separate issue, and we should vote on it separately.
Correct. I agree with
So,
that. That is
yeah.
also my understanding. Rather,
Cool.
of the various things that have been put forward, and so those are not to be decided on together. Those are separate and distinct proposals from each other. Jeffrey, go ahead.
Cool.
I don't know if this is too into the weeds or nitty gritty, but I think it should be fair if chapter council wants to form subcommittees that people who are not on the chapter council could perhaps join those committees in case there's a member of the Daguerre populace that would have a good perspective, but they're not a elected chapter representative.
Okay. So depending on the type of committee and how it's being formed, should those committees be able to include area experts or community members and stuff like that. Thank you. So whether that's, I think, what exactly those should consist of and who can be included in those councils, I think would be something for later, but that is a good suggestion. Um, okay, for later, all members can listen and speak at chapter council meetings, and all members may be appointed members of committees. Okay. Noted for later, thank you. So this, I think, is the talking about the directors forming subsidiary groups and about the chapter council forming committees is sort of bridging the gap between our leadership structure and the leadership responsibilities. So I'm just going to put that there. So putting aside the question of whether non-chapter council representatives can be included in those committees. Does anyone have amendments or other suggestions before we move to voting on whether the chapter council can create committees to debate issues or create proposals? Okay, if there are no amendments or other suggestions or thoughts regarding that proposal, I think we are ready to move on to a vote. So the next vote will be either in favor of or yay or nay vote on should the chapter council be able to form ad hoc committees or in the process of conducting its duties. As before, please don't vote until we have the text for the vote in chat, just so that we can go back and look later. Okay, a motion is in the chat. Please vote, chapter reps. Whoop. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that is everyone. That passes. Okay, next. The next proposal is that the executive board members be able to create subsidiary groups to help conduct their duties. For example, a PR director could have PR representatives from chapters individually conducting public relations stuff and putting out flyers and ads and doing that sort of stuff. Or a director of finance could have people helping with taxes, or I'm not sure exactly what, but that the executive board members not be solely directly responsible for doing everything personally, but that they're responsible for overseeing possibly a group of people to conduct their duties. Are there any suggestions, amendments, or other thoughts regarding that proposal before we move to a vote? Stone suggests that at the end of the day, the buck stops with the director, so the director is still ultimately responsible for failure to complete their duties. Future recommendation: ensure board members will be responsible for the working groups, and that the board members would individually be held accountable for the failure to execute their duties. So accountability structures to be determined at a later date.
May I speak? Stone?
Please go ahead.
I was kind of seeing that these groups as, for example, I'm not sure if it's going to be under operations of public relations, but being able to appoint a website administrator who happens to be a member of Value here or not paid, but it would still fall under the director to direct said website administrator. Or public relations being able to appoint Facebook moderator group as an example of groups.
Or finance director hiring an accountant.
Yeah.
Wow, spelling. So the ability for directors to form subsidiary groups or hire or recruit. So less, this proposal here, at least as proposed, is my understanding, is less that the directors have working groups to propose ideas and brainstorm, and more that the various directors of our executive board be able to hire people or recruit volunteers to execute their duties. Recognizing that for a national organization, that might be necessary. Okay, leaving the floor open for another 30 seconds for comments, questions, or other notes before we put this to vote. And then any mechanisms to ensure that the executive board members are still being held accountable for their responsibilities would be determined later in the fine print of the bylaws. And then any finer details about exactly what restrictions there are on that, obviously, we can also decide at a later date if we're worried about that power getting out of hand. I'm not seeing any other suggestions, proposals, or comments, so we're going to move to vote to either approve or disapprove of the ability for directors to hire or recruit assistants. Motion is in the chat. Chapter representatives, now is the time.
Mind turning it down just a little?
Okay. That is an important detail. Thank you. We will, and that is something to be addressed later, as you noted.
This is Luda.
Yes.
I think we're just waiting for Cirle. Are you going to vote on this? Thanks.
Okay, motion passes. So restrictions on that particular ability to be determined at a later date, including financial restrictions. Last thing to address today, recognizing that it is starting to get late. I want to start working through what we think the responsibilities of the executive board, the chapter council, and individual members should be. So, not again getting into specifics like we're not getting into the specifics such as that the executive board must provide 5 leaflets per year for advertising purposes or anything like that, but generally, what things should we be assigning to each of the various governing bodies? Thoughts, proposals? Roran, go ahead.
I think that the executive board should be responsible for, the day-to-day sort of maintenance of the organization, finance, taxes, all that fun shit. And that the chapter council should be responsible for electing members to the executive board and responsible for changes to like game rules. So, maybe like we do the bi-yearly vote at the RAG War Council on rules changes. That could be moved to the chapter council, be an online thing, happen every other year, just like it has been. I think that responsibility could rest there.
Stone, please go ahead.
I was going to say something similar that this might be a good item to specifically debate over the next week before the next meeting, so we can have more specific directions.
Okay, it's been proposed that the specific responsibilities of the executive board and chapter council be debated over the next week. Caveat, next Sunday is the 4th of July. So we would either have to meet on Saturday or meet the week following. So that would be a 2-week break. Gorbag, go ahead.
I was going to say for chapter council, the ability to add additional responsibilities to the executive board.
Okay. Proposed. Jeffrey, go ahead.
I was going to say I'm fine with allowing for more debate over the next 2 weeks about this, but if we aren't going to go with that, then I think the chapter council should need to approve any sort of financing decisions made by the executive board, because ultimately, however the executive board wants to fund National Dag here, it's going to rest on the chapters and the people that the chapter representatives are representing.
Noted, thank you. So our motion to postpone the responsibilities discussion to next meeting on July 11th has been seconded. Does anyone object to discussing having a 2-week period of discussion for responsibility allocation between our various governing bodies to then formally vote on July 11th?
I don't have an objection, but I do have a question because I can't remember.
Please go ahead.
When is our deadline?
Our deadline is the end of August. Currently, we are hoping, just to give you a general timeline, the general timeline the logistics group has discussed was have a general structure decided by either today or the 11th, then allow the most of the month of July, so from the 11th to the August 1st, for subcommittees here to draft the specific bylaws, and then we discuss and vote on those specific bylaws by August 15th or 22nd.
Okay, yeah, waiting doesn't seem to put us on a time crunch or anything, so no objections here.
Dragon, thank you. Noted. Okay, so proposed allow 2 weeks for debate regarding leadership responsibility allocation. Any objections to this proposal that we delay this discussion until July 11th? Or excuse me, that we discuss responsibility allocation between now and July 11th and then formalize that July 11th. While I wait to see if anyone objects, we are going to be asking for we're hoping to have subcommittees from this body get together and draft the various components of the actual bylaws once we get a national structure down. So we're hoping that most of July after the 11th, it looks like, is going to be spent doing those subcommittee meetings and getting some bylaw drafts ready. So that's where the specific debate on things like the stuff we've been deciding for later is actually going to get worked out. And then we would come together as a formal committee, like as the whole committee, and then vote on those to approve those specific bylaws and stuff or amend them at the end of July, beginning of August. So please think ahead to that time period between July 11th and July 25th / August 1st. We'd really love to get to hear who would be interested in helping with those subcommittees and contributing to actually writing those bylaws. We want this to be like the bylaws that we're trying to make. We want them to make sure that they're representative of everyone that's here, and we could really use that help making them. Just thinking ahead to what we're going to need at that point. I don't see any objections, so we're going to postpone this discussion. Good timing, right at 8 o'clock. For the next 2 weeks. Currently, the formal decisions we've made today are that our executive board, or excuse me, our leadership structure will be consisting of the members of DAGA here, as in the individual participants within each chapter. Those members elect a chapter council, and then the chapter representatives on the chapter council elect an executive board. The chapter council is able to form ad hoc committees in the process of conducting its duties. To be determined is whether those can include non-chapter representatives. And the directors are able to hire or recruit assistants to ensure their responsibilities are being executed effectively. To be determined is what restrictions there are or oversight there is for using that effectively and responsibly. The executive board consists of an executive director, a director of operations, a director of public relations, a director of finance, a director of records, and an arbiter. To be determined later is whether the executive board will also include a shadow and what voting rights or responsibilities specifically that shadow might have. So up for discussion then are specifically what the responsibilities are of the executive board and of the chapter council. And I think this would be a good time to discuss the role of shadow over the next 2 weeks. So I want to make sure that that gets noted as well. Gorbag, go ahead.
Just a question on the responsibility discussion. are we anticipating going so far into it to discuss specific board or directors' responsibilities, or is that going to be for the subcommittee?
I think specific member, like executive board member responsibilities would be for subcommittee, whereas things like which group is responsible for doing taxes, which group is responsible for helping new chapters get set up and doing chapter registration, stuff like that is what's being discussed at this point.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page.
Thank you for confirming. Would the existing channels suffice for this discussion, or would we like new specific channels to be created for this, archiving some of the old ones that are no longer being used to make sure that it's not getting too cluttered? Gorbag, go ahead. Oh wait, did you already go ahead?
I already went ahead.
You already went, sorry.
I feel like we could close the leadership bodies and executive board composition and start a new channel for this discussion, because those are technically two different topics.
Okay.
I agree. That makes sense.
Okay. Debate regarding the following to be created in new discussion boards to vote on July 11th. The allocation of responsibilities between the various leadership bodies. Are there any other suggestions for specific topics of debate between now and next meeting? I think that after we get the responsibilities done, and I've seen debate on finances, so hopefully we got to finance stuff in the next meeting as well to approve at least some ideas for finance streams or revenue generation. Ericos, that is helpful, thank you. Stone, thank you very much. Any other suggestions for topics to debate? We can continue debating finances. But then after deciding on responsibilities and voting on finance or revenue streams next time, I think we'll be all set to move into subcommittees. Amu, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to add in responsibilities of the member and the chapter, as we're designating those specifically as part of our existing chain now. We need to discuss their responsibilities as well.
Okay. So, then that would be. So up for debate are what are the responsibilities of the executive board of members of chapters, and then what is the role of shadow, so that we can determine whether we want to include a shadow in our executive board next time. With that, I'm going to leave the floor open for. Okay, Gorbag, go ahead.
Just because I'm not sure, would we can't talk today? Does executive board include chapter council, or is that a different?
No. The executive board is the board of directors.
Okay, so we need responsibility of chapter council as well, and the responsibilities, correct?
Oh, true. Thank you. Okay, executive board, chapter council, members, chapters, and then shadow. Thank you very much, Gorbag. Okay, I'm going to leave the floor open for the next 30 seconds or so to see if we have any other comments or suggestions for things to discuss until next time. Lacking other suggestions, though, I thank you all for participating today and for joining us. I feel like we've made good progress, and I look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks. And I look forward to some excellent debate in Discord.